fees. Can't put it in the general fund, can't be commingled, got to be in separate escrow or separate accounts. So there's paperwork, there's enough. It's not that it can't be done, but I'm just letting you know that there are some interesting issues with that. If the planner, I don't know if Sharon signs off on building permits. If she doesn't, she has to, or somebody, or the building inspector has to be the one to determine whether the impact fee is going to be paid. In Salem, our building inspector wasn't really interested in doing that, so I do it. I sign off on building permits. And obviously some applicants are, some people are not very happy about paying the fees. There's a lot of pressure to spend that money. In Salem, we've had a lot of growth and development, so we've raised a lot of money, and there's a lot of pressure to pay those fees. Somebody came in one time, I was on vacation, and they asked the selectmen to use road impact fees to pay for landscaping on the side of the road. Road impact fees are supposed to be used for capacity improvements for roads, something that's going to improve the capacity, allow more cars to travel on the road. They wanted to use it for landscaping. Clearly not a qualified expense. Selectmen didn't really know about that, and they wanted to help the resident, and there was a big pot of money there, and they wanted to do that, so ultimately that didn't get done. Public Works Director wanted to have a road overlaid. A lot of potholes, a lot of problems, wanted to move some curbing back. No capacity improvements. The Selectmen approved that one. It was kind of a two-part deal. They were going to try to do some capacity improvements later, but so once you get a pot of money there, there's a lot of pressure to spend that money on different things. And I guess the last thing in terms of general comments is collecting the money doesn't really solve your problems. It's doing the project, making some improvement, some capital improvement that solves your problem. And like for a road project, it takes a lot of time and money to get to a point where you're ready to actually build a road project or a school project or a new park, for example. It takes time, and it's easy to run out of that 6-year time period pretty quickly. We've got around that in some cases by spending the money to do the planning for the capital project, the engineering work, the survey work, whatever. But one time there was a big project. We spent probably $500,000 in impact fees to do the planning. I don't know if it was that much money, but we designed a whole road widening project, and the Selectmen decided not to go forward. They thought the work was going to be done by the Department of Transportation sometime soon. The Department of Transportation didn't do the work sometime soon. So we spent all that money on the plans, and basically it didn't go anywhere. Those were my introductory comments. And again, I didn't want to turn you off from the concept. I don't want to be negative. I simply want to, give you some of what my experience has been with the fees, some of the issues, some of the problems, so that you'll know about that. I'd be happy to answer any of your questions if you have any.
If anybody has questions, feel free to ask, and then we can, if there's more discussion after, we can discuss it among ourselves.
Ross, you can certainly feel free to sit down and join us at the table.
Okay.
This is not, you're not being quizzed.
Oh.
So.
Yeah, I'll sit down a little bit.
Just for clarification, I thought I heard you say that if someone's coming in, let's say for a commercial building, just for a building permit, they're doing an addition that maybe doesn't fall within the site plan because of the size or something like that. I mean, that would trigger impact fees?
It depends what your ordinance says. Our ordinance, for example, we have if you were doing an addition onto a building, you might in fact have to pay a fee. If you're reusing an existing building, say a different type of use, typically I say to the planning board, I don't think they should pay since the building is already there. If you put an addition onto the building, you pay a fee.
And I want to interject. Probably didn't mention Dick Lewis as the Selectmen's alternate for tonight's meeting as well.
Yeah, I mentioned that a little earlier.
Okay.
That's okay.
Mr. Dragon, you had a question.
I wanted to know if what organizations, nonprofit, are there exceptions to this impact fee to various?
That's a really good question. It was one of the points that I kind of skipped over, but our ordinance, and I guess you could set it up in your ordinance that you could allow waivers to be granted. We for example, allow a waiver if you're building a senior housing unit. You don't have to pay a school impact fee. But the status of your organization being a nonprofit or profit would not be anything that would, in our ordinance at least, that would be allow you to get a waiver. The waivers are relatively limited. For example, if you rather than paying, if you're being a single-family house, we've had a couple of situations where there've been low-income people, and you say, well, how are they building a new house? What for whatever reason they're able to build a new house, and they don't have the money, or for one reason or another. And that's a difficult situation, but the ordinance doesn't really allow a waiver for things like that. I guess you could write your ordinance to allow waivers. I know you can do that, say, for example, for affordable housing. One guy came in and basically said, it's not economical for me to pay the impact fees. This was a commercial developer. I can't build a road that I have to do for frontage, and I can't develop my property with the type of buildings I want to and pay your impact fees. There's no waiver provision. The appeal, by the way, is to Superior Court. We adopted it as an innovative land use control. The appeal is to Superior Court. Most people don't want to have to go to court to fight an impact fee unless it's a pretty big fee. But
Just to
so I don't know if
add,
that answered your question, but there aren't. Maybe you could write some waivers in, but you'd have to be careful about how you write those, because anybody that could apply for a waiver would probably want to apply for a waiver.
So if someone wants to construct a new house, a new home on a piece of land in Salem, they also have to get permits from the town,
That's correct.
and that's based on square footage. They pay money for that,
Yes.
and that is equalized out to the amount they plan to spend, and they pay a percentage of that.
Yes.
So in addition to the impact fees, we still have the regular process.
Absolutely.
Of the permit fees and all these
That's
other
right.
things you pay.
That's correct.
Almost sounds like double taxation, doesn't it, huh?
Well, and people have raised that argument. The building permit fee, I think, is different, because there you're paying, in Salem at least, you're paying for the cost of the building department to do their inspections.
People are still paying and paying and paying to build, and someone on the other side of the fence is spending and spending to do it,
And you're
I don't want to
absolutely,
get into that. I just want to see what the exceptions are and
Yeah.
what, I think it's an area that we have to be very sensitive to, and fairness is a big issue in this, as far as I can see, on impact fees and how you do that. And that's a very difficult situation, as you had mentioned.
it is. You're absolutely right. There's no
How
question
to
about it.
balance that out and be fair with
Yep.
everyone,
Yeah, and some people may say, well, we don't want to do it because we don't want to tack on that added cost
Yeah.
to people, and the complexities of it are not what we want to do. And other people say, hey, wait a minute, the benefits that you get from raising that money and being able to spend that to fix some of the capital facility problems in the community are worth it. But part of it probably depends on the value of or the amount of the fee. I will tell you that in 2010, we had a consultant come in and look at our road impact fee system, and he recommended a change, and the planning board and the consultant compared our fees with surrounding communities and recommended a kind of a blanket reduction in the fees, based on the fact, and the planning board went along with that, based on the fact that the planning board was very concerned about tacking on too much. Well, who decides how much is too much? If you're paying the fee, you probably have a different idea than somebody who's collecting the fee. But that is one of the big issues.
John, I saw your hand up, but I know Sharon has a comment first, and then I'll recognize you.
I was wondering what deterrent there is as far as having, at first anyway, of having impact fees. I know in the southern tier of the state, no one for the last 10 years have had really worried, because there was so much business and so much building that people were, standing on the byline giving you money to get these impact fees and so on. But from Concord above, and especially up here, what would be your thoughts as far as adding impact fees at this particular time?
That's a great question. And one of the points I meant to say was, if you're not going to have a lot of growth, if you don't think you're going to have a lot of growth, might not be worth it. It really depends, because it's growth that triggers the fees.
Right,
If you raise, $30,000 for a new school, you're probably going to be giving the money back, because, $30,000 doesn't get you much of a new school. In Salem, we just had a tremendous amount of growth, so it
Right.
made a lot of sense.
Bottom tier of the state.
Yeah.
It just didn't make any difference.
Yeah,
what
although
we
it's
got.
been slower recently, but, and you might think, we took a look at that Tenny Mountain corridor, and maybe if you think, hey, there's going to be more, just thinking out loud and not telling you what to do, but if there's going to be a lot more commercial development there, and you may need a wider road, or you may need some intersection improvements to handle that traffic, maybe that's one place you do want to do
Well,
it. You don't have to do it town-wide.
The problem is that we did have a large concern trying to get in on Tenny Mountain Highway, and it was shot down by a very few people in the town of Plymouth without even impact fee, and they moved on. So we really, other than Walmart, have very, very little commercial businesses that would pay any kind of an impact fee.
Yeah, that's one of the issues that you have to consider, I
What
think.
I'm wondering about, is this the right time to, you can discuss it, but is this the right time to start tacking on more money when people are having a hard time?
And that's absolutely a consideration. Another consideration is, if you think now's a lousy time for the economy, but, over the next 20 years, what's going to happen? Is there a lot of developable land that's going to get developed? Are you at some point going to have to widen the road? I don't know.
The big problem with Plymouth is that we're hemmed in. We got mountains on one side, a river on the other side, and railroad tracks on the other side. So, you've got a very small portion of actual land that you're going to be able to use commercial.
Yep.
And probably at least 60 or 70% of that land is already built up. So the only way they're going to be able to build anything more is by either a large firm coming in and buying and knocking it down and building more buildings.
And that, by the way, has happened quite a bit in Salem. We have very limited, we've got a 6-mile-long retail strip,
Yeah.
and it used to be farmland in the old days, but it's not farmland
Yeah.
anymore. But we had development in the 50s and 60s, and what happens now is the land is so valuable that people are coming in, tear down the existing buildings, put up new buildings, so we get the fees paid by the new development. But you got to decide that. I can't help you with that.
Sharon,
I did bring Ross here as a ringer because, as we found out the hard way, this is not a simple issue to address. It's very complex, and like I said before, it's fluid. So it's nice to know that you share our pain a little bit. The zoning ordinance on page 62, and excuse me, by the way, this has been recently updated to include the 2010 definitions, so you all need a new set of this also, so please remind me I said that. Anyway, the site plan regulations and the zoning ordinance speaks to section 1007 on waivers, so you do have the discretion on a case-by-case basis, as long as it's applied fairly on the same cases across the board. Upon written request of the developer or person to find good cause to provide a waiver, but it's got to go to public hearing. So it has to be a situation where there's a bit of input on it to make the case for it. And like we were speaking earlier about waivers, it's there, which is a great safety valve, but on the other hand, it's something that has to be taken, dealt with carefully and thoroughly and implemented fairly, so it's there.
Mr. Gosney, and then Mr. Roach.
And then me.
Not sure where I'm going to direct this question, so I'll throw it out. As you're considering whether or not to apply this impact fee, if you have a developer, and I'll take the instance here that Mr. Kelly referred to, if you have the developer that's working with the planning board on the actual development of the site, and there's a requirement that the planning board places on moving that development forward, is the widening of the adjacent highway, and to the point of perhaps even putting in a roundabout or relighting it or that kind. Does that also have any impact on whether or not you waive the actual impact fee? Because there can be substantial amounts of work that the planning board may require as an actual approval process of the site development itself.
Right. That's a great question, and the answer in Salem, at least, is it depends, which is kind of a waffly answer. But and the reason I say that is if those improvements were needed based on the traffic, to mitigate the traffic from that particular project, we would say that's a front door improvement. You had to do that no matter what. You don't get credit. If you do something beyond your front door, say beyond the frontage of your property, that's to help the overall traffic flow in the corridor, then we give you credit towards your impact fee for that. And that's happened several times. Walmart came to town and they had to put a traffic light in front, but they also agreed to do some additional widening further away from their store. We gave them credit towards the impact fee. But anything right in front of the store, we say, no, you own that. You had to do that no matter what. The impact fee, and our ordinance makes this clear, is for off-site improvements. Those types of traffic light in front of your store, we consider that to be an on-site improvement.
Thank you, that was helpful.
Mr. Roach?
Yeah, over the years that you've had impact fees, have you had anybody appeal to Superior Court? Have you ever had any appeals?
Once.
Once?
In the 80s. It actually was a case that ended up going to the New Hampshire Supreme Court, and before the impact fee ordinance, before the impact fee legislation was passed by the state, this is what happened, and they argued primarily about the way we derived the impact fee. This was the road impact fee, and we ended up winning that case.
But I assume if you go to Superior Court, the town has to defend itself.
That's correct.
Whether you win or lose, obviously, yeah.
Right.
Okay.
But that you know, and I don't necessarily know why, but it just hasn't happened very often.
Thank you.
Ms. Bishop?
Yes, a question you had indicated, I'm assuming that all the monies that is collected goes into the general fund.
No, none of it goes into the general fund.
It does
It
not,
all goes into a separate account.
set aside.
In fact, the state
Into
laws,
what fund do you guys call it?
the state laws make that very clear, by the way. You're not allowed to put it into the general fund.
What fund do you guys put it in?
It's like an escrow. It's kind of like if a developer had engineering fees.
Okay,
No, it's
and-
not slush.
And so the question beyond that goes to, how does the selectmen get control of this escrow? Because you were indicating that there was issues, and I wanted to know, how does
The state law
this
said,
account and the selectmen, how did you guys deal with that controversy?
the state law says the only group, the only party that can expend money
From the escrow?
from that fund, we don't call it an escrow fund, honestly, I don't know what I call it. I just send the money to the treasurer and
Capital
he keeps
reserve,
it.
I would think.
Yeah, something, it was a reserve fund of some sort.
Okay.
The state law says, and our ordinance says, the selectmen are the only ones that can spend money from that account.
Okay. Then I want to continue on that the town treasurer, what I'm assuming is the town treasurer, is the one that attends to it in your town,
Yes.
and she would be the one. To do that, how easy does the individual, say for instance, you had mentioned $7,000 per family. So if I'm going to build a house, I'm paying $7,000. 6 years go by, how can I contact the town treasurer and know where my $7,000 went, and how can I follow through with that? You must have dealt with that, or your town has, as far as somebody coming back and asking that.
We have had people ask for that. I don't think we've ever given any money back. I guess I should put that on the bad news too, depending on your perspective. Maybe that's good news. We've had some people ask about that. In some cases, we've said that the money has been encumbered to be used for some planning for some road projects. The town treasurer and I we developed a system so that each fee that I send him, each check that I send him, has a map and lot number and a street address. He keeps track of all that every year. I think our ordinance actually says that automatically. I don't even know if I think it's kind of automatic where he's supposed to send it back. I'd have to check our ordinance, but
Interest-bearing accounts, too, correct?
yeah, these are interest-bearing accounts, so maybe we have sent some money back, but not a lot, I'll tell you that. And so he keeps it by map and lot, and so the property owner could always come in and say, hey, have you used my funds? But in most cases, the town has figured out a way to use that money.
They're a good town.
Yeah.
The other last question I have is, you had thrown out a figure of 7,000 just for somebody to come in. Is that you're evaluating square footage? I mean, I'm thinking if the 7,000 is what you're starting, is that the minimum, or is that just like a plain little ranch?
Well,
15 square foot
well, let me-
home, is that gonna cost that 7,000, and it can go up on, if somebody's gonna build a $400,000 home here, are we talking?
no, it's not based on
1,000.
value at all. It's based on the, actually the type of dwelling unit. If you build a townhouse, it's less money. If you put in a mobile home, it's less money. But if you build a new stick-built, single-family home, it's just under 7,000. And that includes 4 different fees, by the way. I've aggregated it together to one number, but that includes roads, schools, public safety, and recreation. So I send a form to the treasurer, and he takes that money and separates the money into the various accounts.
Yep.
It doesn't matter whether you build a big house or a little house, or a very expensive house or a very inexpensive house, a 2-bedroom house or a 10-bedroom house, you pay the same fee.
That's my question,
Yeah.
thank you for.
Some
saying
systems I've seen have done it based on the square footage of the house. I think that's very difficult to manage, and the guru of impact fees in New Hampshire is Bruce Mayberry, even though he lives in Maine. But he's done a lot of the systems in New Hampshire, and he had recommended that we not base it on square footage because there's a million different ways that you can try to finagle your way around that.
Mhm.
Closets and unfinished space and all sorts of things.
Thank you.
Does the school portion have to go into the school
Just gonna ask.
projects?
Yes. The school portion can only go to the school projects. You can't use school impact fees to pay for roads.
And then, like years ago, they were supposed to have the lottery tickets only go to the school, and the town would also pay, but over the years, the town said, well, they've got enough money, so I guess we won't put it into the school, and the lottery will take it over. Is there a problem with having money go into the school and have the school have the ability to spend it any way they want that's legal?
Well, it's only supposed to be used for capital expenses. You can't use it to pay for teachers or for
Right.
books or, equipment, things like that. In Salem, I guess to some extent we were lucky. The school district had floated a bond to pay for some school expansions, and they've used the impact fee money to pay off some of the bond, pay down some of the bond. They've also used it to do some planning for some additional future expansions that they've proposed. They send a letter to the Board of Selectmen every year saying, please release X amount of money that we have used either to pay down the bond or that we've used for these qualifying expenses.
Do you ever find that the school might be having more aggressive capital projects because you had the impact fee?
No. Because it's not that much. If you look at, we floated a bond for a new, 3 new schools, $21 million 2 years ago, additions to elementary schools. The impact fees have raised $2.5 million. I don't think they'd be more aggressive. They might do some more planning, but I don't think the cost of building a new school, as you know, or in addition to a school, is so expensive that I don't think they've been more aggressive in their planning or their building because of the impact fees.
My big thing is playgrounds, which is a capital thing, and a lot of accessory projects that they could use that money for, that if they didn't have the money, they might not spend it quite as freely.
And that's one of the problems. My own opinion is that a playground, say at an existing school, that's not expanding the capacity of the school. And again, that language is in our ordinance. You've got to use it for a project that expands the capacity, either a new park, or a new recreation facility, a new public safety facility, a new school, something that adds capacity, basically classrooms. Could somebody say, please release the money because we want to do a school? Yeah, they can, or a playground at the school. They could ask.
Yeah.
Would the selectmen let them do it? Hopefully not, but maybe they would. You don't know.
And I think
So
what,
that's one of the issues. Go.
I kind of think what John might be saying, and what my question was, is there a way to quantify whether the existing property owners, homeowners, might get a reduction in their property taxes because of this new fee?
They won't go
Yeah.
up, theoretically.
Well, we never say that, by the
I
way,
know
in
you
Salem.
didn't
We never
say
say taxes won't go up. That's the biggest complaint, by the way, in Salem. I'm going to write a book someday, as I said, but the biggest complaint in Salem, we've approved 8 million square feet of commercial development since I've been there. 8 million square feet, including a million square foot mall. It's a ton of commercial development, more than you could possibly imagine. People complain about their taxes in Salem. Our taxes are lower than any of the surrounding towns, but people still complain about the taxes. It's all relative, taxes. But I think you probably could quantify, because you could say, well, if we've spent $2.2 million reimbursing the school district for the cost, the bond, if that had come out of taxes, here's what would have happened to your taxes. So I think you could quantify it. We haven't done that, but I think you could. Likewise, if a road project comes in and the town, we did a road project one year, we widened a 2-lane road to 3 lanes, put in a traffic light, we used impact fees and some public money for that. If we had to use all public money, obviously taxes would have gone up. So I think you could quantify that. And that's, again, that's the good thing. That's the positive thing about the impact fees.
That's the premise
Yeah.
for having it.
Right.
So you don't have undue
Each tax
burden.
increase is smaller.
Unrelated, yeah.
Did you see that the mall had a vacancy rate of like 30%? It just came out, over the TV. They're really concerned about it.
Yeah, I didn't say that. I don't think it's that high in Salem, maybe,
Yeah.
but they got one big tenant, but I guess I can say it up here. They got one big space that's anchor space that's vacant, but as long as you don't tell anybody in Salem, I can let you know that somebody's coming in there, so. Don't tell anybody in Salem.
Go ahead, if somebody's...
Mr. Dragon?
We have zones in our planning board regs here: residential, commercial, institutional, municipal, agriculture. Do you have zones
Oh, yeah.
like that? Okay.
Zoning districts, yeah.
Now, my question is, does the impact fees, they're not the same for all the zones,
Yes, they are. They're based on the type of development. Yep.
whether it's commercial or residential? If
Well,
you apply the same formula?
Well, commercial doesn't pay school impact fees. Only residential pays school impact fees.
So there are some differences
There are some differences, that's correct. The public safety impact
within the
fee,
zones, that's what my question.
well, not so much based on zones, but based on type of development.
Well, type of development.
Yes,
yeah.
if it's
Thank
commercial development, you're paying a different set of fees than if you're building residential development.
you. Thank you.
Do you have a copy of it?
Have you seen the impact fees drop in the last couple of
This
years?
is there.
Drop,
Yeah.
the receipts tremendously,
Volume?
dramatically, yeah.
I don't have that, do I?
Yeah, at one point, and I had the number, I don't know if I brought the numbers with me.
Talked about a different kind of commercial.
Yeah, I don't think I gave them to Sharon, but at the peak, just as an example, we had raised $200,000 in road fees. In 2009, that was down to $5,000. So with schools, the peak, 1999, $327,000. That's 1 year. 2009, $48,000, so. And it's all tied to development.
Yeah.
So again, if you're not going to have a lot of residential development, if you don't have much developable land left in your community, and I don't know what it is in Plymouth, it may not make sense, or it may make sense only for some type of development, not everything.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I had mentioned this to you earlier when we were speaking, Russ, but, we found it hard, this group has worked hard to try and rein in the overview because it's so overwhelming, and we do realize that Bruce Mayberry is the guru, and that's why he, has all the work on this in terms of developing a fee schedule. But would you advise us perhaps to approach this slowly and incrementally, such as, I told you we tried to start an exercise looking at Tenny Mountain firsthand to the exclusion of residential development because we weren't having much of it right now. And it was so overwhelming we tried to focus it down. But would you advise us to perhaps look at, road fees first, or just I mean, do you break it down into increments, or just go for the whole shebang,
Well,
in your experience?
well, what we did was we did road fees first, and then we did school fees 3 years later, and
Most
then...
overt impacts.
That's right.
Yeah.
Road was the biggest issue. We had a lot of traffic congestion because we approved all that development. If it was me and I was in your shoes, the first thing I'd do is I'd call a consultant and have them come in and just take a look. And you can probably have them do that without paying them up front. Come in, take a look, see what they think, have them even talk to you, then give you a proposal for what they think is going to be best. I would use Bruce. We wouldn't use anybody except
No,
Bruce.
He's the guru, he knows, he's
but,
the
I mean, there
paramount.
might be other companies that do it, but he's done most of them, and he's defended them in court, and he's up on the statutes and the all the different issues with road impact, with the impact fees in general. So, so yeah, it might make sense to start with something like, if you thought that was your biggest problem area, it might make a lot of sense to start that, see how it works, get a system in place for administering the fees, and then move on if you felt that it was warranted.
But you would, I mean, and I know I'm putting you on the spot, and I promised I would, but in your experience, because you're here to share your experiences with us, from, outside Plymouth, it seems like we're probably at a point where we want to communicate through the planning department with, say, Mr. Mayberry, and have someone do like a preliminary assessment, perhaps?
Yeah, I think what would typically happen is they'd come down, take a look, and ask you some questions, and maybe they'd talk to the police and fire chiefs, and they might talk to the school district, and they would
Get some data.
talk to you about roads. I don't know if you have traffic studies, if Walmart did a traffic study, see if there are any,
Yeah, we do
if the
actually.
Regional Planning Commission, anybody has done studies about what road improvements are needed. They'd probably look at all that information and some of your financial information and give you a rough idea whether it made sense to go forward. And I think you could probably get at least some initial work done without having to pay any money. At some point, if you move forward and say, yes, we want to do a road impact fee system, they'd say, okay, here's how much it's going to cost. But they might come down initially just to look at it.
So there's that option to move forward without totally jumping in the pool.
I think so.
Put a toe in.
Mr. Lewis.
I mean, just, I guess a comment on Tennemont Highway, I mean, that's a state highway. How does impact fees interrelate with projects on state highways when it's gonna be DOT that's footing the bill in some fashion or participating?
Route 28 in Salem is our major commercial strip, and a portion of that is state highway, and I'm trying to think whether I know we deal with the state when they issue driveway permits for some of the uses. Typically, the applicants are negotiating, applicants have paid impact fees for development on the state portion of the highway. We've treated them the same as if they were on non-state portions of the highway, so it might be something that has to be looked at, but that hasn't come up in Salem. And honestly, we've negotiated, one of the things we do somewhat well is we negotiate with applicants to make road improvements. And they know that the price of coming into Salem is you got to make road improvements. We'd love to have them, and God knows we have a lot of it, but a lot of development, but you got to make your road improvements. And so they negotiate with us, and a lot of times we send that to the state, and the state signs off on it. So
I guess, just a general comment.
It's a
sort of a critical component of impact fees is having, an active and somewhat progressive capital improvement program. It's not a windfall. You just can't put it in the bank and sort of spend it as you want to at some point in time, and it's got to all sort of work together in these specific categories that you've outlined.
you're right, the state law says you have to have a cap improvement program if you want to do impact
Which
fees.
we have here.
But I mean, even to, excuse me, I'm sorry, Bob, but, a comprehensive overview of long-term upgrades to the entire road system in town, that would pay for something like that,
Yeah.
theoretically.
Yes.
Which I think we have in pieces, but it's not overly
Well, you
comprehensive.
you can't use impact fees for maintenance.
That's
No.
correct.
Or widening or something.
No, to get a consultant in.
Yeah.
Road inventory, that
Yeah.
kind of thing,
Mr. Dragon.
Would the town planner, or will you have any information, how many of the cities and towns the state of New Hampshire have impact fees? Do we have a
I
percentage
had
on
that,
that?
did I send
I'm
that
just
out?
curious.
I think I passed it out before, and it's on my desk.
There's dozens, I don't
Oh, we do
know.
have information on
It was
it.
minimal.
No, I've got the information, Bob. It's downstairs, so I could get it to you. OEP
But is it
got out.
overwhelming or just a very small percentage?
No, I think, well, see, this is the thing, it's who has the ordinance, and then the second step
Oh, yeah.
is creating the schedule of fees and implementing. So a lot of, you correct me if I'm wrong, Dick, but I think a majority of towns have, or quite a few have the ordinance, but whether they've implemented or not is another story.
It would be interesting to see where
But I can follow up.
where the majority of the impact fee ordinances are, you know.
You're right,
They're
Mike.
below Concord, above Concord, you know. You could have 80% below Concord and 10% above Concord. And it would be interesting to see that analysis too.
Ms. Bishop?
Yeah, the only question I had, you had indicated a consultant. Would that be something like Bruce Mayberry?
Yes.
You're referring to, that we would call him and say,
Yes.
can you consult us?
Yes.
And he would be willing to do that with no fee?
Well,
Depends on how far it goes,
Well,
obviously,
you
how
had
much
said
work you want from them. Yeah, I think he'd
ask a
come down and talk to
consultant to come in.
Sharon and take a look at some of the documents and maybe talk to some people and see what he thought was feasible. Yeah.
we for him, and he.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah.
Thank you. You just clarified that for me.
Mr. Gosney?
Just a request, I would be interested in seeing that information on which towns do have them, because I can visualize possibility of arguments being put forth, valid or not, that, let's say, Plymouth was a singular town in this region that had impact fees, and somebody might be able to put forth the argument that that was an impediment to the actual development that we would value. So it would be
Point,
helpful
right.
just to see where they are. I'm not saying that's the case, whether that's real or not, but I think it would be interesting to see where they fall.
We need to know that.
I also believe that as we look at some of the things that John's asked about, in terms about where they're located, certainly growth in a community, regardless of whether it's substantial or it occurs over a 20-year period, I think that's a good discussion to have as to whether or not taxes should gradually increase to deal with the implications of that growth, or if there should be reasonable amounts that are contributed by those projects that are driving that growth, so that you've got that incremental. And I think that's an interesting discussion to have, or quite frankly, it's probably a dilemma to have, because how do you achieve that balance? Because the upshot of it is, if you don't have impact fees, and you are seeing growth, even if it's gradual, everybody in town is paying for the adjustments that you have to make to your capital infrastructure to deal with that. And I like the 4 boxes you put things in: recreation, safety procedures, your education, and then your highway. Those are the 4 that kind of come to mind for your capital. It's interesting to hear you guys have been approaching that while I've been away.
And the counteracting agent, which is providing the dilemma that we've been suffering through on that, is you've got your 6-year window and your recognized needs, but then, you know, affecting that is the economy and, you know, things accelerating and slowing down, and you're trying to catch up and be in tandem and parallel with it to accomplish your goals. So you've got to try to project at the same time where you're going. Hopefully you can do that too. It's just, it's challenging. It's very challenging.
Just a question. Do you know how that you assess your properties in town? In other words, there's 2 ways of assessing properties. One is income approach and the other one is by market approach.
I don't know. Our assessor does that, I don't know.
All right.
We'll find out and let Sharon know, but.
This might be a good time to end this portion of our discussion with Mr. Moldoff, and then we can continue the discussion as a board to see which direction we want to go. There's a lot of variables here, and you've got an hour and 20-minute drive home, I think, tonight, and it'd be nice for you to, unless someone has any more questions for him, we can kind of
Thank you.
figure out where the board would like to go.
I would like to thank the gentleman for all his comments. I found it
Thank
very
you.
helpful and informative.
Thank you, I'd be happy to answer anything else
The
if
only thing
you.
that scared me is the last name, because I said, oh my God, it's going to be the impact on investment fees.
On what? Yeah.
That was Madoff.
And hopefully Sharon can keep some communication open, and we appreciate you coming here for
Yeah,
us.
you're welcome. Thank you. It was nice to visit.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Very, very.
Thank you. It was nice to visit Plymouth.
And he came for free, too, so that's a good doobie.
You owe him, Sharon.
Drive safe.
That's yours.
Would this be a good time to take a 5-minute quick break, and then we'll have Sharon come back and
So
we'll
moved.
continue?
Tongue in cheek.
kind of get an idea of what the board would like to do from here. I can give a quick recap of what brought us here. The board did see a need, an interest in impact fees. We put together a subcommittee that met by phone. Ms. Bishop did a lot of background research on it, came up with some good information, and brought up the name of Bruce
Mayberry.
And we kind of said we're not ready for that at this point. There's a little bit more research to go. We can talk about where we want to go from here after the information that was presented. And anybody would like to offer some information or comments?
I think that, and certainly run this by the rest of the select board, although we have 2 representatives here. If you folks concur, I think this might be a good time to, I can contact Mr. Mayberry, maybe Rhonda, when he does come, would like to meet with me and he, and just do the, the
Preliminary.
preliminary thing to see what's happening where we're at.
Where to go and what?
Yeah, I mean, he may be backed up, he may not be able to even deal with us till September, so perhaps it might be effective and efficient to just see where he's at now. And of course, there's that money issue, because I think I told you before, I have 5,000 in my budget, which would not, I doubt, pay for a full-fledged, even faceted analysis at this point. So that would have to, go on the warrant, get appropriated and everything. But, for the first hour free thing that you always get with professionals, so to speak, I'd be happy to contact them and report back to you, and then we'll take it from there, and then maybe, Rhonda and I can meet with them. And
Mr. Dragon.
I haven't been to some of the meetings lately because I've had some other personal issues. But if the board members that are here and have been in some meetings that I have not been able to attend, have they come up with the idea that Plymouth should have impact fees? I would think we have to address that before we say, what are we going to go through all this other stuff for?
There have been members of the board that have voiced that concern. Is it necessary? There, I believe, were 1 or maybe more on this subcommittee that voiced it more than once. Is this necessary? Is this, as you mentioned, going to impede growth when maybe we need businesses in Plymouth and jobs, more jobs in Plymouth?
Well, this gentleman mentioned a good point. He said if you're having real expansive growth, obviously you would want to address this, but I don't know if we're at this point. But I'm just asking a question because I'm not aware of what the members feel from past meetings. If we decided, or the board or the members feel that we should go forward with more study and to implement an impact fee or whatever. I think we have to determine, do we want that before we go through all these other meetings?
Mr. Renlock.
Just an opinion.
Yeah, I mean, myself, Bob, I'm looking at all of this, and where you've got the 6-year window, unless we really see stuff starting to come down the road, I mean, by setting up everything, getting the impact fees, it probably would not pay. But I think this individual, if he would come over and talk, get the information, and then give us an idea, it would just be another way to, to finish off all the information. But from what I heard him say and, all the other information we've gotten, we're probably not at that state. I mean that time in the town's growth.
Thank you.
And my opinion may never really be. I mean, what we were looking at and what started the whole thing was, with Tractor Supply and CVS and maybe someone else across the street, it was like the 3rd or 4th person in that, tips the traffic volume or whatever. All of a sudden, they're having to, pick up these fees. And like Ray said, I mean, that's included in the approval of everything.
Mr. Gosnell.
That being here and having the opportunity to be part of some of your earlier activities around this, just to offer you a cold case assessment of listening. If I go on my feelings are right now, that we're dealing with a lot of the theoreticals, pros and cons, that I think we ought to continue, because I do believe it's not necessarily the time at the moment, but that's the purpose of this group, is to do planning.
Yep,
So
exactly.
my belief is that we probably ought to invite other people who have the wisdom and experience to continue to advise us, so that we can get into the thinking stage of this and get out of the feeling stage.
Exactly.
And if we get to a point where we now think that the timing is such and the need is such, we won't be playing catch-up. We'll be somewhat ahead of the curve.
Exactly.
And I know it's always looking for dollars for consulting fees, but that's the purpose of this group, is to do planning.
Exactly.
So I would coach that it'd probably be wise to continue to have the
Yeah, I
discussions,
would've-
to really get the answer to what you're saying. Do we think we ought to do it?
Mhm.
I think we ought to do the planning to continue to ask the questions.
Exactly.
Mr. Kelly?
Makes sense.
I think we should continue on an exploratory type of plan and get everything set up as a base, instead of doing what is usually done in Plymouth, and that is wait until the time comes, and then all hell breaks loose, and it's chaos. You know, if we got a base and put it on the back burner, then at least we will have the time to explore the laws and everything to do that.
So it's not, Ms. Bishop?
Yeah, I just want to say that, Ross, Sharon had asked him the simple question, what would you suggest? And he explained to us how he went about it. And I think that his recommendation, get the consultant here, and I believe that we should make that first step. That's going to give us some more feedback. What they had done for the first 3 years was did that road thing, and he suggests, focusing on that Tenny Mountain area. And then just, you don't have to do the whole town thing. Let's just feel it out first. Let's see if you want to do the Tenny Mountain thing, and then if we do that, let's feel that out for 2 or 3 years and see how that's going, because if anything's going to bloom around here, that's going to be where it's going to want to be. So I think that we just need to keep forward here, just take small steps and, talk about it along the way, and I think we don't need to go full blast and hire Bruce Mayberry and, get right into it. I think that would be a stupid move, but
Well,
I think we're on the right track. I agree.
He'll help us assess our needs so that we can
Right.
Focus.
keep it focused.
Exactly.
Right, and then expand it.
Right.
I think that with Rhonda, though, you're going to have to worry about discriminatory type of thing. I'm saying, well, Tenny Mountain, we're going to charge Tenny Mountain impact fees, but if they want to go down below, then we don't give.
Below where are they
charge
gonna
them
go?
No, it would be
impact
tied to
fees.
type of development.
Right,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Tight,
Yeah.
yeah.
But, yeah.
It appears there's a consensus among the board that we should contact this Bruce Mayberry, find out what he would be willing to do for us, whether it's an assessment and then a sheet of paper that we can then distribute, or whether he, it might be the whole other end. He might be willing to come here and answer some questions for us. We'll find out if you can contact him. And then we'll suspend the conversation for now until we find out what his assessment is.
I think actually if you used other towns too, towns that have it and towns that don't, most of the time, some of the municipal, like selectmen, planning board members or something like that, would be willing to come up and talk to you about what their problems are.
And this gentleman might also already know what towns have
Yeah.
impact fees and which ones don't, and
Yeah, I'll
what the
find
reasons
that out,
are.
and then we can perhaps have future speakers.
Yeah.
I mean, not to, belabor this to death, but if we could get some local/regional feedback on people that have implemented this, that might help.
Ms. Bishop?
Yes, Ross was going to give us some handouts that he had gotten from Bruce Mayberry. Did he
Spaced out.
walk out with them?
Spaced
or
out, you're
did-
right.
did
I
he
think
hand
he
them
was
to
gonna
you?
give, unless he
He
left
was
them
going to give them to us, but
downstairs.
he ended up...
No, you're right. He's had a long day.
All right, so we'll move along here.
Planner's burnt
Okay,
out after
sorry.
Can I just
Yes,
excuse
Mr.
me,
Lewis.
just when you contact Bruce, and it might be good maybe to give him information on square footage of commercial development in town or on Tenny Mountain Highway, just give him some baseline information, so that when he starts doing, either assessments that he does from afar, or when he comes into the town, he kind of has a flavor of what's been going on.
All right, so we are moving on in the agenda to the new item number 6, which is correspondence.
5.
I have correspondence, but it's relative to unfinished and other business. It's some administrative issues from prior projects we've got to kind of tighten up. So I think it's more appropriate, if you don't mind, to keep it on item number 7. And I will ask, did everybody in your packets, hopefully got your packets, get all your planning and zoning and?
Yes, I did.
That's what I would call correspondence. Oh, good.
I did want to sign up for that, and I did try to, Saturday, June 11th, the Planning and Zoning Conference, I did contact them because it wasn't very informative.
No.
They give us the listings of the courses, but when I've previously attended them, and some of us have before, usually you sign up for certain ones at certain times, because obviously you can't pick the ones you want, because the same one might be going on the same time.
Yeah.
They said that on the 15th, which I believe next Friday, you'll be able to go online.
Oh,
and
okay, yeah, it was
get
just a
the agenda.
preliminary website, the
Exactly.
link, yeah.
So just to let everybody know that, and it is from
Thank
8:30
you.
to 3:30, because they didn't indicate that either. But I do want to sign
we'll-
up, but
So if you do want to go to any of these, let me know, get back to me. If you want to sign up online, they're pretty reasonable about understanding you represent a municipality, and, you know, I get one check ready. Or if you just want to give me the paperwork, I'll do it. Whatever works.
All right, we'll move on to assignments, reports, the committees, Board of Selectmen liaison. Mr. Gosney.
Well, start off with a question. Perhaps think about it and get back to me at the next opportunity. As you think up ahead for the next 11, 12 months, not only for myself, but for Mr. Lewis also, be nice to hear what your expectations are of what you're looking to see me do on your behalf.
Well, typically to let us know what is going on with the select board, what projects are coming up, what issues that you want to keep the planning board apprised of. We'll then tell you where we're going on our end, and if we need feedback or direction from the select board, that would be, I'm not sure what else you're asking.
Yeah, well, I thought I made it very general and wide open for a reason, just to see what might come forward. I'm certainly very familiar with the expectation that you want me to convey to the select board the important outcomes of the work that you're doing on a bi-weekly basis, but I just thought perhaps there might be things beyond that that you'd like to see be accomplished that perhaps didn't get tended to. I can assure you that with a couple of exceptions, I've looked at my calendar, and you're going to have the pleasure of my ugly face most of the time here, so.
I guess I would ask, and obviously, it's a given that you folks would bring this impact fee conversation back to the board, because, you know, it was the board's mandate, as I understand it, unless I'm in error being the new kid, for the planning board to go forward with this ordinance and develop a fee schedule. So I guess I'm curious as to how the board, a couple of years down the road from that, feels. You know, if they still feel that it's imperative, or should we proceed in the manner we're proceeding, which is cautiously objective and forward-moving, or, I'm curious to touch base on that again.
Yeah, well, if ever you hear me speaking and you don't hear me clearly say that I'm speaking for the board or I'm speaking personally, challenge me on that. I think it's important for you to know when I'm speaking for the board versus just conveying personal interests, or I'll try to stay away from personal positions. But I will certainly take that question back, because I am not aware that the select board has a position on the idea of whether or not impact fees are something that should even be studied.
And
My
that's
personal
members.
view is it
with
makes...
Marion Bader,
There's
so.
members.
Pardon?
I said that was way back with Marion Bader, was
Yeah.
when that project came up in the CVS.
I am aware that the previous select board rep to your board was very interested in seeing something move forward in that regard, but I don't believe that was a board position. I believe that was a personal position. But if you're not clear on when I'm opening my mouth for whom I'm speaking, please challenge me to make sure I do that, and I will we will make sure that we convey the things that have occurred here tonight.
Well, I know it's been on my table for the 8 months I've been here, and, you know, it had existed before, so next thing you know, you're 18 months into something, and all of a sudden wondering if it's relevant or not, because the process is, or current, I should say, not relevant. So
Yeah.
it'd be good to double check, I guess.
Well, I also, this is me personally speaking now, believe that you should be exercising some of your autonomy to move forward in your role. You're not subject to the whims of the select board. You certainly want their concurrence and their blessings, but they don't manage you.
Exactly.
They certainly are somebody you want to seek advice from.
And I think,
Certainly you ought to make sure you're exercising your own degree of autonomy.
So we'll hope that,
You're the only organization in the town, other than zoning, that has that kind of authority.
Actually, I have a handy-dandy schematic here I wanted to pass out. You know me in paper, but it does show the chain, well, not the chain of command, but the protocol and how one
An
portion.
org chart?
Pardon?
An org chart, organizational chart?
Yeah.
Yeah. But if I was thinking about the flow of information, I would think the select board in just as many instances wants to hear from you as to those things that you find are important and we ought to be moving forward on.
Please. one
and
more.
it was very, more gathering information than anything else.
Thank
And so if you could apprise them of where we're at on impact fees, and
Any
we'll
concern?
continue on our end, the way we're moving.
One more?
And I can make another one.
Anything else, Mr. Gosney?
No, thank you.
If I may just add one thing, I mean, I've been to 2 select meetings so far. At the first one, there was discussion about sort of asking the members of the board to think about sort of 5, sort of primary work items for the next year. And we had a short discussion at the second meeting on that. And one of the topics, I think, that was on pretty much everybody's list, and I mean, I think, correct me if you think I'm wrong, but I think there was concurrence on the issue of just economic development, especially along Penny Mountain Highway. So kind of those efforts that the Board of Selectmen might undertake would certainly dovetail with what the planning board does and how you approach that, so.
We'll skip over the Conservation Commission and go to Zoning Board of Adjustment. Sharon.
We've actually, spring theoretically is here, so we are starting to ramp up again, which is good. The zoning board met the day before yesterday, this is Thursday, on Tuesday, and gave a variance approval to 16 units of elderly housing on Fairgrounds Road, 230 Fairgrounds Road, the old sleeper property. A 1-unit building, 1-story, relatively low impact. It is being put forward, constructed by Southern New Hampshire Services, which is kind of parallel to Tri-County Cap, you know, and it's HUD monies and this and that. Is 62 and older. So I expect we'll see that. I don't know if they can get their ducks in a row soon enough for our April 21st meeting to present a site plan, but it looks like a very worthwhile project. I know I'm going to be 62 sooner than, seriously, like less than 7 or 8 years. And I think it's what applies directly to our demographics. It's fairly modest, and I think it'll be well done and appropriately done. So the ZBA passed the approval for the variance, so you'll be seeing that soon.
I think that we have we've had discussions on this before as to why does Plymouth have to have all of these nonprofit, low-income housing where all of the neighboring towns don't seem to have the same percentage as what we have. We're really loaded up on that.
In this case, it's not nonprofit. There would be payments in lieu of taxes and/or the whole tax rate without the school portion, and they do have a similar facility in Ashland and also in Bristol. So, I mean, we're talking a little bit
I'm
apples
not
and oranges.
talking
No,
that
I know you're
one
not.
thing, I'm
I know.
talking
But-
the total amount of organizations such as that, or for the needy and for all this stuff.
We're a
We
service
are
hub.
really loaded up on that, and also as far as in lieu of taxes, that's sort of a joke, because the university pays in lieu of taxes, but it's like 5% of what they should be paying.
And that comment was brought up, not that, at our last discussion, and I think someone had mentioned that there's nothing in the master plan that's saying that's not the direction we should go in, and I think it needs to be addressed in the master plan first before we can then take that direction.
Well, I was talking to Jen, as far as the master plan is concerned, could you say next year is when,
It's 2008, so it'd be 2013 that it's due.
2000 what?
13?
13.
It's a 5-year
But
plan.
again, I think it would have to be a lot like with the impact fees. I think we shouldn't wait until
Right.
that moment. We should start talking about it. And a lot of times when we don't have anything for a particular meeting, instead of not having a meeting, we should probably be more attentive to some of the bylaws and the laws and things like the master plan and stuff like that, just to get us to know what is going on. Because all of a sudden, you got the camera on, you got, and you just cannot get down and white knuckle it to find out really what we want to do.
Moving on to the Water and Sewer District Sewer Protection Committee, Ms. Bishop.
Yeah, just for the public, not for us to be really concerned, unless you're worried about your bill, but as far as the septic or sewage charge has not been raised, the rate has stayed the same. As far as the water uses, it has gone up 4 cents per thousand. That's the only new news that I care to share.
The Pemmican-Chawasit River Local Advisory Committee, is there anyone that would love to serve on that committee? You have to be appointed by the governor.
I really wish someone would, because I've gone sometimes, but we really need a designated representative. I'll go with you once in a while.
How many times does it meet anyway?
It's once a month,
Once a month.
or bi-monthly. It's not terribly often.
There is a lot, it seems like there's a lot of work that's going through right now through email. There's, there, on the state level, I do get the emails. On the state level, there's quite a bit of cutbacks that are going on. Some positions that are proposed to be eliminated. There's a lot of email to get support to make sure that doesn't happen.
At
That's just
DES,
the-
you mean?
I'm not sure if it's DES or the State Rivers.
Oh, okay. Advisory committee.
Yeah, so that's the only thing I have to report there.
Do they know who's on that?
Well, right now, I'm on the list. I've been on it,
I could probably tell you, John, I've got that information in my office.
but I'm the representative for,
But Mike was the designated or appointed.
yes.
So.
Newfound Lake Region Watershed Steering Committee. No, we have no one for that either.
Could I, just a point of clarification on that? We had a member appointed to that before?
It really wasn't on a specific committee, but we had a member of the board that was willing to add that
Yeah.
as a committee, as well as, I think, the Newfound Lake Region Association. He
Because-
was-
They were on it.
As the planner, I've attended some of their meetings and been somewhat affiliated with them. But on the other hand, also, you know,
It wasn't, I don't believe that was our regular.
Was
No,
Paul
it
doing
wasn't.
some work on that?
was he?
Maybe we could contact Paul first. And I know Plymouth is in that watershed, a small section of the community, but
It might be interesting to have a meeting sometime when we have a meeting, we don't have a lot to do, is to find out what the responsibility is of the person and what they actually are doing, like next meeting or the meeting afterwards, to find out, you know, if you just raise your hand, you say yes, and all of a sudden you find out that you wish you hadn't raised your hand. You know? And so it's not a mandatory type of thing, so you consequently, you just don't go. And if you knew what was involved with it, then maybe at that point you could say yes or no and be an active member at that point.
I would be willing to talk to you a little bit about my experience after the meeting. At least for the Pemmichawasset.
Yeah.
Plymouth Regional Emergency Management Committee, we have no representative on that.
How often does that meet? Is that, do you know?
I don't know. You know who would know is your lovely wife.
Yes, because
perhaps.
I'd be willing to do that one if it's not like weekly.
So,
Yeah, and they meet in Florida.
Yeah, that's not bad.
I'll check with the
Why?
Yeah,
Town Lake
right.
Association to see what the requirements are on that.
I know we had someone from that committee come and talk to us, I think 2 years ago. It was pretty informative.
Mm-hmm.
Town planner, anything else? Report?
Yeah. As the town planner, I've been the recipient or receptacle of all the pertinent information regarding the Groton Wind Farm, because Plymouth is a bona fide intervener, and also for Northern Pass. And as you know, if you've been reading the paper, both of these projects are really going great guns and causing a lot of controversy and interest. I was down in Concord today. This is essentially an update on the Groton Wind Farm project. The Site Evaluation Committee, which is the state-level committee comprised of different department heads from different state departments that acts as a bona fide planning board in these kind of projects for oversight. They were meeting today after testimony since, gosh, I don't know when, last November, I guess, including testimony from the town of Plymouth, to decide if the application to go ahead with the Groton Wind Farm should be granted approval. They had a day of deliberations. I had to split because I had to come home and get ready for this meeting. I presume they're still deliberating tomorrow. There has been some pushback from the AG's, the Attorney General's office, who speaks for the Public Counsel. There's a fairly long list of conditions that they want to see imposed on the applicant, which is Iberdrola Renewables. And the town of Plymouth has put forth their ideas and concerns, as have some independent abutters. There's been lots of expert testimony, and there still are quite a few unresolved issues. So your guess is as good as mine, but my point being that unless something totally goes awry and the committee decides to postpone this type of interaction, that we should see some sort of decision fairly soon on whether or not this application should go forward and have total approval. And I see an outside date in the paperwork for building of July 2013. So that's, 25, 26, 7 months from now. So
Did Mr. McNally attend with you?
no, he wouldn't.
Wasn't it-
He
wouldn't-
wouldn't have. No, I was just kind of there to be eyes and ears.
Okay, so
Yeah.
it wasn't anything to...
No technical
Okay.
stuff that's come forward.
Thank you.
The same applies somewhat to the Northern Pass project, which has seen, again, a lot of public interest. You may have read in the papers recently that a bill was put forth in the state legislature, House Bill 648, to change the language for eminent domain criteria. And that was successfully passed in the House to include a caveat that speaks to a truly delineated and assessed need to promote that kind of acquisition by eminent domain. So that's where that's at, and you can pretty much read that in the paper every day. But it's quite a fascinating political process, and I think we're lucky in this state that we can speak to, local issues. That's what democracy is all about, so we shall see that that's chugging along too. But I think Groton's about to come to a head here with some sort of decision. And other than specific things I'll address later, I think that's about it. Just a heads up, a personal heads up. Next month, the workshop meeting in May, I have to beg your indulgence to not be here. My oldest son is finally graduating from college.
Yay.
No, it was the pay-as-you-go plan, but it's in Montana, so I'm going to miss the meeting, if that's okay.
Montana State?
At Bozeman, where Sarah Jane was from, yeah. Both my boys are out there, but I do beg your indulgence to not be here on May 3rd or whatever it is, so that's all I have.
Are you going to talk
Question
to,
about
go ahead.
What about that Walmart gate? I see it on.
Oh, the Walmart gate, yes, yes. I did, thank you, Pat. I did, well, winter's never going to end, so.
Yeah, I know.
It's not ever going to be open because they'll never be able to stripe the road. I did meet with the manager at Walmart, and he met with his regional marketing person, because, you know, it's a big corporation. And Mike Vignali dug up the old plans, so as soon as it's dry enough, which hopefully is next week, this week, it was supposed to be a couple weeks ago, Walmart will contract to have this three-way stop striping put in, the stop signs, and then the gate is open. So there's essentially 4 stop signs. The Walmart access road, either way, and then coming out of Walmart, and then the crossover, and then Boulder Point. So as soon as, you know, Mother Nature works with us a little bit, it's a done deal.
Hey, thank you.
You're welcome.
You get some notes, Tractor Supply, CVS.
Okay, Tractor Supply is just about ready to have their pre-construction meeting, which is great. I do have an administrative issue on that, which is really just clerical, that I'll speak to when we get to unfinished business. As you can see, CVS is moving tons and tons of earth. It's amazing. It looks like Bob the Builder out there with all the Hiltz trucks. But I think that's a really good thing there. We'll see how it impacts traffic. They've managed to get through the permafrost. They had heaters and black paper out there and all kinds of stuff, and as Bob can attest, you know, it looks like they're doing a pretty good job, I think.
You're going right at it, that's for
Yep, they sure
I
are.
can't conceive why they started so early, but
Yeah. Well, they may be on a tight time frame, but I will report to their credit, the sub for the general contractor for CVS and Tractor Supply. These folks have been very, very professional dealing with the town, and they're good people, and there's no, you know, behind the scene. It's all out front and very easy to work with, so that's great.
well, that's good, Sharon.
No,
Good to hear
because
that.
it could be, you know how those
Yeah,
things go.
right.
You don't have to babysit them because they're doing a good job.
Let's move on to unfinished and other business then.
Okay, Tractor Supply, let's see, I've got so much paper. If you folks recall, I won't be able to find it, when we did the notice of decision for Tractor Supply in December and then into January, well, I don't even need it, I can just speak to it. Oh, here it is. There was a little confusion, and it was just clerical confusion about the sign. Well, in actuality, Mike McGinley owns the lot and will own the sign. But the notice of decision references Tractor Supply. So I need to go in and change that. So I'm just giving you a heads up. You don't have to vote on it. It's purely administrative and clerical, but I just like to be, you know, out front on these things. So I'll take care of that, because that is a technical impediment to Tractor Supply, because their corporate folks are going, this isn't our sign.
Right.
So that's number one, so that's done. These two other items will need some voting, or a motion put forward. Mike McGinley, who does own the property across the street, the old Lowe's, we'll call it Lowe's for the sake of discussion. If you bear with me, I'll just read this to you really quickly. I requested the planning board confirmation of the, quote, 2-year site plan approval on the approved parcel as it pertains to the board's notice of decision dated August 16th, 2007. In our zoning and in state legislation, any approval carries the caveat that it must have substantial and active development within a year, so you just can't get an approval and sit on it for 10 years, you know, and the zoning changes, and then it's all inappropriate. In this particular case with the Lowe's lot that Mr. McGinley owns, he was granted the notice of decision approval for 2 years. You guys expanded it a little. I guess you were on then? You would know. So you gave him 2 years, essentially, to get that going. I am currently in discussion with another entity for development of this commercial site. It is necessary to confirm with this board that a 2-year site plan approval timetable, specifically, this is his request, June 9th, 2010 to June 9th, 2012 is mutually agreed upon, and he's asking for the board to confirm this. I can run this by Attorney Radigan, which is what we did with the next one, which is Plymouth Woods. The fact of the matter is that the applicant, Mr. McGinley, was not afforded his rights because the litigation impeded his forward progress. So he shouldn't be made to suffer with his approval running out, the clock running out, so to speak, because there was litigation brought against him. So basically, he's asking for the same 2-year approval time frame for active and substantial development, because as I understand, they haven't even turned any stone except for test pits and stuff like that over there, and to not be penalized for it. He is asking, as I said, for this to be retroactive from June 9th, 2010, so he's already kind of lost a year, to June 9th, 2012. The board can look at that specifically. You could take this under consideration. Sure. And come up with your own time frame, or I can run it by Mr. Radigan and make sure.
Mr. Gosnell.
I would recommend that before we do any further deliberations, you run it by Mr. Radigan
Okay.
to make sure. There's 2 reasons for doing that. That the first instance is because this matter was litigated so extensively, you need to make sure you're continuing to cross all your T's and your I's. And the second is that I would believe that would indicate to Mr. McGinley that we're acting on his request, even though we didn't approve his request. So I think there's 2 reasons to seek out legal advice.
I know I'd be much more comfortable with that,
Yeah.
especially coming into it, you know,
Especially with
in the
what's
last
happened.
quarter.
If you need that in form of a motion, I'll make it. Otherwise, it just
Yeah.
I would,
recommendation.
please, if you don't mind.
I'll move it.
Second. All those in favor of seeking counsel, town council, on how we're going to respond to Mr. McGinley's request or confirmation, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Okay, and last, in that same vein, as this applies to Plymouth Woods, the 24-unit development, which, as you all know, because you were here and I wasn't, had the same experience, went to court, to Superior Court. The ZBA's decision was reaffirmed. So the principal there, who is Mr. Brown, Jeffrey Brown, he's the project manager for the Plymouth Woods Limited Partnership. He had spoken to me, oh gosh, December, or maybe January, I can't even remember, about the same kind of thing. His time frame for active and substantial development got waylaid. We did run this by Mr. Radigan. We did get a decisive response from Mr. Radigan. Mr. Woods was before the ZBA, or his request was before the ZBA on Tuesday for this same kind of relief, essentially because he got the zoning approval and the planning board approval. So he did receive approval from the zoning board to reconfigure, if you will, the time frame for his active and substantial development parameter. Mr. Radigan, I'll read this to you real quick. Blah, blah, blah. It says, during the pendency of the Superior Court appeal, the 12-month approval time is stayed. Essentially, the clock doesn't run. I think the easiest way to handle this is to have the applicant request an extension from the planning and zoning boards to extend the 12-month period for whatever period of time that the ZBA decision was under appeal, beginning at the time the applicant applied for rehearing, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, we went through, we did the math. That, in this case, with the ZBA appeal as the criteria, that ran 299 days. Excuse me, it's really dry in here. So essentially, the 299 days was the date of April 6, 2010. That's the ZBA decision being under appeal, to December 30th, 2010, when the Superior Court made its rendered its opinion plus 30 days, so 299. Anyway, long story short, the Plymouth Woods project got their ZBA expansion of their year time frame from Wednesday, April 6, yesterday, 2011, through January 29th, 2012. So they went ahead and did it. Mr. Woods is asking for the same relief from you folks. And the particulars are in this letter, which I just got. I'm sorry I didn't get this out to you sooner, but I just got it yesterday, and I was in Concord all day today, so it's been really busy.
Papers,
A lot of
huh?
them. A lot of them.
Oh, yeah. This is a paperless world.
Can you give me the extra copy, please?
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you
No.
gave yours
Next
away.
one's coming back.
Okay.
There's 2 copies, so a copy coming back.
Now, he wanted this to go before the planning board at the 19th, but I felt, I mean, you can certainly just take it under advisement tonight, but I felt since the ZBA approval had been extended this week, that if we could get these things to run kind of tandem, it would be a lot easier, but whatever.
Sharon, why wouldn't the date start
The same
from
time.
December, they've got, their appeal finally made a decision December 29th, 2010? Is that what I'm understanding?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
They got their final Superior Court decision, which was the last decision on what day? Was it December 29th, 2010?
Yes, plus 30 days
Okay.
is what
For the
the
appeal.
lawyer said.
So that would be sometime then in January 2012?
Yeah, they, meaning the ZBA, granted him an extension on the ZBA approval from April 6th this year, 2011, to January 29th, 2012.
Mr. Gosney, you had a question.
Now my questions got confused by the statement I just heard. The current sunset date with all of the stuff that's in place now is what?
Our stuff or their stuff?
The limitations that the town is placing on Plymouth Woods, what is the sunset of that, right now?
It is 1 year from the date of approval for the various things
And that-
without active and substantial.
What is that date right now?
For his planning board approval,
The total
I have it on
town
my cheat
process.
sheet.
It looks like May 5th in this letter.
I'm sorry, it's here. I actually had a clip to it.
Well, May 20th. May 20, 2010, so if it's 1 year, it'd be May 20, 2011.
What I'm inclined to believe, Mr. Chairman, is looking at the letter and adding the 30 days plus 1 to January 30th of 2011 is to giving a 1-year extension to January 30th of 2011 rather than that May 20th.
2012, I mean.
2012, excuse me, yeah. Because he's asking for the additional period from 289 days to 365 days in a calendar year. That moves it out beyond that 289. He was only impacted 289 days.
Yeah.
And I certainly can agree that that's what he ought to be done, and I was going to do it +1, just for the ease of it. But that way it would take it to January 30th, 2012.
Well, it was the old, which day does it start thing? You know, which
He
is
was-
fine.
The process impacted him 289 days.
Exactly. And that's what we ought to go
Just trying to keep it simple. I'd give him 290 days from where all of the approvals and all the appeal process all expired, and start from that. So it's January 30th, and take it 1 year beyond that to January 30th, 2012.
Is there a case to be made that if there was no appeal, that 30 days was used up? Do we need to include that?
He couldn't do anything pending an appeal.
No, I mean, these are the parameters that the lawyer set down.
Good point. Essentially, if you're a builder, I wouldn't do anything until I knew the appeal had expired. Personal view.
Which it had on December 30th. Let me read
Mr.
this.
Radigan said that would go through January 2012.
No, we just counted. Should extend?
I thought that's what the,
Oh, okay. No, I'm sorry. The decision for Superior Court came down December 30th, 2010. They had 30 days,
Butters did.
right, to appeal it.
So I would.
They didn't.
Yeah, I would move that you consider the idea of using a date of January 30th, 2012.
That's what I come up with.
That's fine. Well, it's 1 day different from what the ZBA came up with. So, I mean,
Okay.
just for consistency's sake, that's what I had said.
And the ZBA's date was January 30,
29th?
29th.
okay.
29th.
I'll amend to that for consistency.
yeah.
So we've got a motion, and do we have a second?
Right, because December, you know, the old 30 days, half December thing, the calendar's all over
Yeah.
the place. Trust me, I counted for half an hour. So,
Do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Renner?
We have a discussion
Yes,
first
let's
before
have a
we vote.
discussion. Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Renner?
Is this going to create any conflict with the ZBA on this decision, Ray?
That's the same date they
yeah,
gave
just
him.
let me-
Coordinating it?
I have that in my office. I'll be right back. Let me get that other matrix.
I can't answer that.
Door open.
Can't
They-
imagine,
they
I can't
approved
imagine it, but I can't answer it either.
I don't question the motion, I question if there could be some
Why? I mean,
conflict with the ZBA on a motion that really should be coming from them, Ray?
No, it comes
No,
from the planning
no.
board.
From the planning board?
yeah, they're asking the planning board, see, the planning board approved it first,
Okay.
and then the zoning board
Well, ZBA got
issued a
involved for some
waiver.
reason.
Yeah,
Something-
they issued the waiver and approved it for them after that. But I think the planning board has precedence over that.
So if that's the case, then I withdraw my question.
Well, she's gonna go check, but I thought she said that zoning board
She's going to check
set it
for
up
sure.
through January 2012 also.
Yeah. Can't tell from their letter.
No.
Also, we're acting a full month earlier than they're requesting too.
Well, that's the other part too, yeah.
Why are they requesting May 20th, 2012?
I think they just pulled that date out of the hat,
Okay.
assuming it was going to be acted on at the May 19th meeting.
Right.
I
This
think that's when the
went out 1 year.
lawsuit started.
I just have this
Okay.
one
That's kinda
copy,
what I thought,
but
yeah.
What
I
is
just
it?
have all the dates. Maybe pass it around, take a minute and pass it around.
So January,
Well, they see, I mean, you've got weekends and, you know, it's when courts,
January 27th, 2011 is the end of the 30-day appeal period. So we're looking at 1 year from then, so that we still stay consistent given their 1 year.
you could do the 1 year, we're trying to make up for the days that they were not able to move forward. Why don't you read that?
Yeah, it is the 1 year from the end of the 30 day, which the zoning board chose January 29th, 2012. It's probably 1 day off from,
I mean, you're under 365 for giving them an extra. I mean, you're not
We're over.
over, by being consistent with the ZBA, you're not over embellishing them, overcompensating, over.
it's the same day as them.
Well, I would suggest that we could do it in the same days.
Which is
Because you've got
the-
the wiggle room. I mean, you
That
can-
was the day we picked already, right?
January 29th, correct?
29,
Yeah.
yeah.
Which is what we had.
So we-
Plus, if you'll see this, it also says, not to change this, but the directive to me from Attorney Radigan says, and, the next sentence, given the economy, if they, Plymouth Woods, needs a further extension, one can be granted for good cause shown. So you have another
They
opportunity.
can come back to the well again.
That's correct, yep.
So we have a motion on the table, we have a second. There's no more further discussion. All those in favor of granting, what are we calling this, Sharon?
An
An
extension.
extension till January 29th, 2012, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay. That passes.
Thank you.
Any other business?
On the earlier extension, the Lowe's one that you decided to sort of hold off on for right now, what was the date of their approval, initial approval?
Oh,
August 2007.
you would know.
That was way back.
I don't think I have it quite, unless Mike, wait a minute, it's in this package.
The third Thursday of that month.
August 20th, 2007. Oh, I'm sorry.
Around
I'm s-
midnight, if I remember
No, that was the date
right.
of notification, I'm sorry. You are hereby notified at the August 16th, 2007 meeting. Here, you signed it.
Oh, yeah. 3 years of hearings.
I mean, I guess I would just make the point that unless there was something in that specific decision that said per some other ordinance or statute for the town of Plymouth, they got 36 months to achieve accidents.
Oh, for the regular for the development, yeah, the RSA in there. But it's on there, the signed plan, it says, item number 20, this is taken from the notes on the plan, which is essentially bona fide. It says, failure to commence substantial construction of a site plan within 2 years of the date of the final planning board approval of the plan shall render the plan null and
Okay,
void.
so there was a specific note.
It was specific, yeah, I just hadn't gotten that far, because I know that there was that 3-year caveat, so. But I'll double check with Mr. Radigan, so we can get these two little housekeeping things squared away.
To finish up item unfinished, another business, we have one board member that is no longer on the board, and he served for probably more than 3 or 4 years. And that was Bert Sutcliffe, did a great job, and I wanted to make note of that. And also, we want to,
I think the select board is going to.
and it was a pleasure serving with him, as well as John Kuchenberg, who served as a very able chairman of this board. Do we have any public comments? No, seeing no public out there, I will entertain a motion.
Make a motion, we adjourn.
Okay, so moved.
Thank you.
One last unofficial item.